Good afternoon. Thank you once again for being with us today. Today we are going to discuss working conditions and regulations, and if that's not complicated enough, we're going to discuss it in times of COVID. We are live on Facebook, on the Malta Chamber of SMEs Facebook page, and in fact, Facebook is one of the ways you can keep in touch with us, apart from following what we are doing, because we put up pretty frequent posts. You can also keep track and chat with us on Facebook Messenger. We are also present on LinkedIn, on Malta Chamber of SMEs. And another way to keep in touch with us is our WhatsApp alert system. Whoever is in business can register for this by sending an SMS on the number 9999, so 495199. We will also be putting this up on the chat. What you need to do is save this number as SME Chamber and send us the word subscribe. Through this WhatsApp alert system, we will alert you on the most important pieces of news related to business. Don't worry, we will not be sending you too much information. We will just let you know that something important has happened that would require your attention. For questions, we will be welcoming questions as we go along, so please use the chat to post any questions that you might have. I will be moderating the discussion and including the questions you post in the chat to our guest speakers that I will be introducing very shortly. The idea of this webinar, of course, came because I think that never were work regulations as relevant and as alive as they are today. I think that from a very good percentage of the calls that we receive and questions that we receive are related to work conditions and work regulations. As we know, COVID has brought us into a very strange time, a time of a lot of changes, a time of adjustments and adaptations, and therefore this has also had an impact on working conditions and how regulations are applied. And we will be discussing this in more detail. I will be introducing our speakers for the day, and I thank them very much for their participation and support, not just for this webinar, but also throughout the work we have been doing, especially in these times of COVID. So we have with us Minister Carmela Abela. Thank you, Minister, for being with us. Ms. Diane Vella-Muscat, who is the Director General for the Department of Industrial and Employment Relations. I know it sounds complicated, but many of you have learned it by now, the DIER. And Mr. Paul Abela, who is our President of the Malta Chamber of SMEs. I am going to pass the word to Mr. Abela for the introductory remarks, and after we will be going to more detailed issues and things that need to be discussed that are very important for businesses. Over to you, Mr. Abela.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone for this webinar today on conditions of work and regulations. And first I would like, First I would like to thank the Minister, Carmela Abela, for his hard work and dedication and cooperation with our chamber in this difficult moment, and Ms. Diane Vella-Muscat, who is the Director General of the Employment and Conditions, which I know very well, and she is, I think these last few weeks, she was busy answering questions and clearing up approvals from various self-employed and companies to have their conditions in place. And I think this is a moment where we, as employers and employees, we have to work together in this difficult period. We have to understand each other. We will get out from this situation between us. Already the government have issued that from this week, more establishments will be opened, and we'll gladly accept these openings. We have to start from somewhere, although health is an issue, but with the care of everyone and everybody takes precautions, we'll have to start. We cannot keep on like this, business and the economy have to start. We depend on the economy as an island. So I hope that this webinar this afternoon will clear up some difficulties and questions from you, our members, and who is invited to join with us. I'll leave it up to the Minister to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Abigail. Thanks for your invitation, first and foremost, and also thank you for your opening remarks. I'm here with Diane Bernamuscat, presented her already, and I'm grateful to her and her team for the work that they are doing at this difficult period. However, we have been saying this for quite some time now. This is a national effort and a national sacrifice. We've been this through till the beginning of March, more or less, 7th of March, when all the measures and restrictions, let's say, started. We are grateful to each and every one of you because, as I said, this is a national effort. It's not only government, but it's government plus all the social partners, and you are one of the respectable and important social partners in our country. And we are grateful to you and your members for being with us, and as a primary objective is to keep people in employment, and you are contributing heavily to this by keeping people employed. There are a number of advantages for this. It's not only a question of numbers, because we're not talking about numbers here, we are talking about individuals, about people, about families that want to have their mind at rest that they are still in employment. But it's a question also of competition. It's a question of when the time comes, and it seems that we already started releasing some measures, which means that we will try to go to a new normal as quickly as possible. Maybe even today, later on today, there will be further announcements which go in this direction. So it's important that, first of all, we abide by all the health, what the health authorities are telling us, even when we open up. So we need to still abide by the advice of the health authorities, even when we open up. So the use of masks, the use of hygiene and alcohol to wash our hands and all the rest. That will help to continue to open up even further establishments and that have been closed because of this pandemic. So I think an important message is that we are in this together, and we need to continue working together. We have been working together since the first couple of days. MCSD met and discussed, and we have what we are referring to as a social pact when it comes to the contribution that the government is giving for each and every person employed with you, and also to self-employed. But also then there is the issue of the top-up, which we will keep on reminding everyone about the importance of the top-up, as you already know about that, notwithstanding the difficulties that you are encountering about it, and we will discuss maybe also later on about it if you have questions, and I know that there are some questions that go in this direction. But we have to put everything into perspective. This is something that never happened before. So we are in this together, but we are in this together for the first time. And commentators have to go back to World War II for some kind of comparison of this magnitude. And I think that, we need to continue working together in this direction. However, I'm also very hopeful and optimistic. Together in the last few years and months, we did great things together. It's not a question of that success belongs to someone and not to the whole nation. It belongs to the whole nation's success, and it's thanks to you as well. And I'm really hopeful, as you said, Paul, that even we will overcome this period together, and even how international institutions are seeing us when they compare us with other member states in the European Union, but not only. They are seeing that Malta is quite resilient, and that as a country we will overcome this period, and we will go back to economic growth to significant numbers in the current circumstances in the shortest possible time. This gives us courage. It doesn't mean that everything will fall from the sky. We need to work together on this, because to achieve results are achieved by working together. But at least the fact that others are hopeful about us, we need also to be hopeful about ourselves and try to work together to achieve this together. For the time being, I will stop here, because otherwise I will keep talking about it. But once again, thank you very much for this opportunity. As you pointed out, it's not the first time, and it's not going to be the last time that we discuss these issues. Right, so our door as a ministry and as a government, and also on behalf of the department, it's always open to you and your members.
Thank you very much for that, Minister. We will invite you to talk a little bit more, if that's okay. So first of all, you said very rightly that this is something new. We are in this together. And I wanted to ask you, what was the experience from the government side and from the side of the department mainly? I know that businesses faced a lot of challenges, a lot of changes. Some of them had to work around the clock to try and change things around for themselves to survive. And I wanted to see how was this experience with the government and the department, because sometimes we see only our side of the coin and not the other side.
So as a start, as a government, first of all, as you know, the government acted immediately with, from the Ministry of Finance, for example, because cash flow was and still is of essence. So the government immediately took action to allow businesses, irrespective of size, to have enough cash flow, at least for the immediate. We continued with other measures that were taken by the government, and we try to continue improving also after discussing with the social partners, including the Malta Chamber of SMEs. As a department, and I will give the opportunity to Diane to continue to expand on this. The IAR, I really am grateful to Diane and her staff, because this is a relatively small department, with about 20 people now working all hands on deck to cater for all the telephone calls that we are receiving on both lines, 1575 and 1576, and to try to answer to all emails that are coming in, but also to give replies when it comes to the requests for from employers when it comes to Article 42, the famous Article 42 that we've been mentioning for quite some time now. So all these requests are being considered by the department, and the department, I have to say, is very, very flexible. So I don't think that the department is not understanding the circumstances. The department is understanding the circumstances, and it is being very flexible, but also we have to keep in mind that the employers cannot and should not be exploited, even in this period, which is challenging for all of us. But I would like Diane to maybe expand a bit on this from her end.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks, Abigail and Paul, and for this invite. For us at the department, it was a shock, as for many small, medium enterprises, that we had to quickly adapt ourselves to. Usually, the department's role is more of a general assistance on general matters regarding employment law, and also the advocacy side when coming to claims of wages. This had to completely change during the course of a couple of days, so as to try and adapt ourselves to the needs out there in the business. One sudden change that we had to do is the adaptation of Article 42. That when myself, I went to see, delve a little bit into the records of the department, I found that it was only used few and far in between, with the latest records result from 2008 to 2010, when there were just a handful of Article 42 permits issued because of the recession. Today, I can say that we issued nearly 1,000. So what does it mean? That 1,000 operations, 1,000 businesses are operating with the blessing of the DIR, so to speak, that they have the conditions temporarily reduced so that they continue with their operations till, God willing, the situation is goes once again better than it is. And on the other hand, the employees are still in business. So the employer is not losing the resources that we know that how much resources are spent on the employees in terms of training, both formally and informally, on skills. And these are not lost. Then another factor which we found very useful, and I believe that we are going to continue on this trend, is to divide the queries and to have specialized persons from the DIR team that are dedicated for employees and for employers. Why? Because even if the worries and the queries might be on a similar level, the specific need might not be the same. So here I urge employers, as they are doing, to contact us on the 1576, because there are the persons, they are the inspectors, which are listening to their queries, and they can even guide them on how to interpret the law and what is the best circumstance in their particular way. So those are the two areas, I think, which we had to adapt, and for us it was a learning curve as well.
And as I always mention during every meeting, I think, where we meet, our members are not multinationals. They're not very large businesses. They are SMEs. Many of them are small or micro in size, and they have limited resources. They don't have a fully fledged human resource department with lawyers dealing in employment law. And obviously, this hit them a bit hard because they didn't know exactly where to start off from, what they can do, what they cannot do. What would be your first words of advice to these businesses? Where should they start from? What to be careful of?
Yes, sometimes even when reading an employment law, if you're not used to any law for that matter, it can be cumbersome, it can be quite complex even to understand, and how does it apply in my situation. So my words of advice is to at least try and seek some advice before taking the law into your own hands and maybe apply it in the correct manner. There is your chamber, which caters for this, my department. There are avenues which are free of charge, and the people can seek help with it. Why? Because we have seen now as weeks passed, those who took the matters in their own hands, so to speak, some of them are even now being faced with claims for which the employees now are coming to the department with, and claiming of certain irregularities in employment law. Whereas that employer had contacted the department sooner, then this would have not happened, because that's why the importance of Article 42. The Article 42 is there, so the exemption for a temporary period of time to go for less condition is there even to protect the employee, but also the employer. Because we have seen now that weeks past that the employee is coming to the department for claims. Now, if there is a permit, the circumstances will make it more unjustified than rather the employer just took the matters into his own or her own hands and took the law as he might have interpreted. I don't know, Mr. you want to add something?
Yes, what I want to say is very simple. I understand your question, Abigail, and it's the truth. I mean, when it comes to the reality of our small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't have a fully fledged HR department, all the tools that you mentioned. One type of advice is that they keep an open channel, not only with the department, and when in doubt, they should ask, and they should call the department on 1576 in this case for advice. But also to keep an open channel with their employees, that they have other people employed with them, even most of them maybe also family business. I think it's good that they discuss with all those who are employed or dependent in their respective companies, because that will help also not only to understand the situation better, but also to come to a solution. Because the department will ask whether a self-employed or a company has the agreement with its staff. And it's important that the agreement is there, because it will facilitate even further the feedback that the department will give. Because if an employer comes without having consulted or even having an agreement with the employees, then of course we have to send back that request until there is also the agreement with their employees.
So even though employment law might be very complicated, help is not very far away. They can speak to us to give them an initial guidance and an idea, and then the department is providing them with their feedback and even giving them acceptance of certain changes. And in fact, I wanted to ask you a question that came in. Is there a deadline by when the IER will provide feedback on the reduction in working hours for my employees? Can you tell us a bit about the time frames, Diane, that you are foreseeing at the moment?
Yes. Usually within the week, we are managing to reply and to have that settled. We have a backlog which we have reduced. So now it's only about 80 companies. So I'm assuming that the person is coming from one of the 80 companies. We have also noticed, Abigail, that now we have reached a plateau in the number of permits we are receiving under Article 42. And we have seen, on the other hand, an increase in the claims now, in the claims from employees claiming that they have not been paid the correct wages. So I advise the listener, the viewer, that if he doesn't receive a reply by end of week, please do contact us again on info.dir@gov.mt and ask status of his or her application.
Thank you. Yes, in fact, in times of COVID, things are so strange that certain things might seem to be acceptable and nothing will happen, but in reality, the laws are there, and we advise employers to work in the best of manners so that they don't have something that they need to watch their back for. And something that came to us very frequently during COVID was obviously the working relationship between the employers and the employees has changed a bit because of necessities. Many have experienced teleworking for the first time, and for many it was a very pleasant surprise, and they have managed, and when considering COVID, managing quite well is quite a good accomplishment. But then we have also had cases where they tell us, listen, all my employees are cooperating, but I have these two that don't want to change a bit their work to be able to work from home. or else they are starting to call them back to work now. And we are going to see this increasingly since certain sectors will start reopening, but they are either afraid to come into work because of COVID, or they are reluctant to come into work. How would you guide employers in these cases? What are their options? How should they go about this? The first steps and maybe later.
So Abigail, I think you agree with me that we have seen a shift rather from telework to remote working, in the sense that many employees are now not only working from home, but even, for example, from other places to take care, for example, of vulnerable employees. But let us not forget one thing, that at the end of the day, it is the employer who creates the job, the employment, and it is the employer who knows the needs of his business. Now, it is a very good deed, in fact, that the employers have been flexible enough to offer alternative working arrangements, such as working remotely. However, this does not exclude the checks and balances in place, and should not exclude checks and balances in place so as to monitor the business operations. So if a business model is that of giving the flexibility of one working remotely, but that does not exclude the checks on balances on the performance of that employee. And here I urge, in fact, employers, because yes, many have approached even the department, that maybe due to the sudden movement of things, that maybe this was a little bit lacking, or it was forgotten, till exactly as you're saying, one or two crop up with some problems. So I always urge employees, track your operations, track your employees, in the sense that you should monitor how. If you can do it via electronic means, all well and good. If no, you can always, for example, get in your employees or divide them into small micro teams and get them, for example, at least once a week for practical meetings, to see the ongoing, to targets. There are ways and means of how one can do it. The idea which we tell employees is, whether you are working from the office or whether you are working from home or whatever, it is still work, it still needs to be done. Then we have seen some, Abigail, which have told us, listen, whilst on telework, I actually ended up working more because I'm in the comfort of my home, and I gave extra for even. So that is the model that we have to look. That is the communication and flexibility, but obviously everyone has to keep his end of the bargain. Then read the second point, which you mentioned. Yes, in fact, even as a department, we have been faced by a number of queries from employees stating that they are afraid to go back to work, or even because for some reasons or for some reason or another, for example, to take care of their children. So let us divide the question into two. Being afraid is not a solution and is not a justified means to an end. As the minister also said earlier on, all the employers are urged and have to provide health and safety precautions, but employees have to show up for work, in the sense that even under Article 42, Article 42 is issued with the condition that once the businesses open up and their operations increase, people obviously have to resume back and go back to work. So being afraid is not a justifiable excuse, especially, as you said, Abigail, earlier on, this is here with us to stay for quite some time more. So one has to consider that, to adapt and to learn how to work and cope with this new reality. That's one thing. Then, where there are children involved, where there are children and the employer is urging the employee to go back to work, first of all, I urge the employer and the employee to communicate as much as possible and find alternative ways, even especially during these times, as we have seen, the employers haven't gone from 0 to 100, so maybe in operations. So there are ways and means of how to go about it. But at the end of the day, the employee has also do his homework, his own homework, and even apply the concept of, for example, burden sharing in such cases. Why? Because if the operations continue to increase, as we all do hope so, for the economy's sake, then yes, these employees will be needed to work. At the end of the day, let me just put it from another perspective. If an employee, not during COVID, during normal period of time, wants to take a period of unpaid leave, he or she does not come to the department and they don't need to do so. They need to get approval at the end of the day from the employer. So even those employees, and this I have to make it very clear, who are approaching the department for Article 42, Article 42 does not work that way. Article 42, so reduction in conditions, the original request has to come from the employer because of these circumstances we are facing, not because the employee wishes or has to stay at home. Article 42 does not delve into that matter. I hope I'm making myself clear, Abigail, because we have received, unfortunately, a number of requests for employees, but we couldn't entertain because of this reason. To give just another example, if an employee wants to go on an normal day, when not during COVID, wants to go on a holiday, one month holiday, the unpaid leave has to be approved by the employer, but no one needs to come to the IAR. So Article 42 is there. That's why I said in the beginning to protect the employee, but also the employer. Article 42 is there upon request from the employer and not the employee.
If I just can add two quick things. First of all, the first one is that in this specific period, we need also to rely on common sense at both ends, both from the employer perspective, but also from the employee perspective. I think that we need to rely on some common sense on certain decisions, at least. That's the first point. The second point that I want to make is that we, in this period, we have what I would describe as lessons learned, and also learning through the experience that we are going through during COVID time. And as you know, Abigail, we, as a ministry, we started to discuss with social partners and ask some questions. What needs to be changed, what adaptation we need also for the period that we are considering to be as post-COVID. And that includes also our legislative framework. Maybe we need to do further adjustments to our legislative framework out of the current experience and how will the workplace will develop in the not so distant future. We are talking about some maybe are also considering as we speak to make changes to how they provide a service or how they do their daily work. You mentioned teleworking or other types of work. Maybe some are finding it that is viable for their business. Others might see that it's not so viable, or there should be a mix rather. So I think that we have some lessons learned that together we need to adapt to what we are saying or describing as a new normal.
Yes, it is in fact a new normal that is always changing week by week. That is complicated a bit. It takes a lot of adjustment. But yes, our appeal is very much similar. We tell them to take a practical route to discuss with their employees and see how an adjustment can be made. Obviously, one lesson that we learned from COVID is that no step comes without its ifs and buts. So yes, we will need to be a bit patient. We will need to take it a bit easy and take care a bit of each other even in these circumstances. Because at the end of the day, COVID will stay with us for a while. and it's not an adjustment for 1 week, it's an adjustment for a bit of a stretch of time. And after COVID, we hope that the business will still be there and their employees will still be with them to continue a good and healthy working relationship post-COVID. Building a bit on my previous question, now focusing more on teleworking, we are seeing that maybe some employers might want to keep this teleworking arrangement for some employees in case this has worked. Maybe at the beginning they were a bit concerned and afraid from something so new, but now possibly they are seeing that it is working. What kind of legal things they should take care of when it comes to teleworking to make sure they are in line? Because informality sometimes leads to a lot of gray areas, and then something happens and they end up with their back against the wall.
Ideally, there should be an agreement. Now, when I say an agreement, it doesn't need to be a complicated one, but it should include, for example, which days or which hours is the employee to do from the office and which from home. The second point to note is which duties are to be performed from the office. So maybe there are some duties which cannot be performed from home, and others which have to be performed from home. Then I would also include the monitoring and performance in the agreement too. So is the employee expected to submit a report every month, for example? Is the employee expected to do at least once a week face-to-face meeting with the manager, with the direct superior? So, and then there obviously needs to be then a start date and an end date to be renewed. Now one can start off even for a short period, enough, let us give it a try for 6 months, and then he may renew it as deemed fit. Another important point to notice, which employers will be faced with, is to try and play an equal, fair, level ground with all employees, especially with the ones who have the same jobs, so that they avoid some claims due to discrimination, discriminatory practices, etc. Better be safe than sorry. So yes, one has to, as the minister said, has to include the particular circumstances of the employee, but has also to include the company as a whole. So see which areas and which units suitable to give telework, and maybe others which are not so.
Thank you very much, Diane. I wanted to address a couple of questions that are coming in, just to put everything in context. Obviously, the whole government almost has been dealing with COVID, different ministries, certain things coming directly from the Prime Minister, because we are getting questions related to till when the wage supplement will continue, when will vulnerable people be allowed to go back to work. Obviously, some of these are more from the economic aspect and others are from the health aspect. So I am just saying this for the information of our participants and attendees. The Minister and Diane are there to give us information related to work conditions in times of COVID and regulations and how they will be applied, how are things working from that end at the moment, and maybe a future outlook. So that is why we will
regarding the wage supplement, whether it will continue or not. When the Prime Minister announced some relaxation, so reopening of certain shops, he was asked about this as well, and also Minister Silberstein confirmed also in a press conference himself that the wage supplement will still continue to be given to even those shops who were opened or had the possibility to reopen 2 weeks from today. I think this is the second week. So yes, the wage supplement will continue still to be given. It will not be given, of course, eternally. There will be a time when the wage supplement will be be stopped, but there is no specific date by when this will be stopped. Of course, there will be announcements on this, and it will not stop, let's say, from today till today. I mean, there will be an announcement beforehand, so it will like gradually it will be announced, and then it will fade away, let's say, gradually on this. But yes, the weight supplement will continue even for those shops that were open almost a fortnight ago, and presumably also for other establishments that maybe later on there will be some further announcements about it. Regarding the issue of vulnerable people, this is, as you said, is more, we have to see it more from a health issue. I think even there will be further clarifications, maybe also even today, later on today, about vulnerable people. For example, whether they are to be allowed to enter shops or not. I think some clarifications will be made hopefully later on as well. In my opinion, vulnerable people should protect themselves first and foremost. So if I received a letter from the health authorities that I'm a vulnerable person and therefore I need to stay home, I don't think that any shop owner or people working in these environments are going to ask each and every person, irrespective of age, whether you received a notification from the health department or not. So I think that the first thing that we have to also state is that vulnerable persons, first and foremost, should protect themselves. And if they receive notification from the health authorities, they have to stay home or take all the necessary precautions if that is allowed by the health authorities. Now, the question that you made was also whether these are going to return to or are going to be allowed to return on a place of work. I think even here, there are places of work and there are places of work. Whether you can work in your own office, it's one thing. If you have to work in a shop floor, for example, it's still a place of work, but I think there are more risks because you're going to meet more people most of the time. So I think even here, first of all, we have to abide by what the health authorities are saying to us. And in that eventuality, I think that we have to go case by case, maybe as well. But as well, this is the responsibility of the employee together with the employer that has to understand the current circumstances and, of course, be a bit more patient when it comes to vulnerable employees.
Yes, exactly. Even with other sectors, in fact, Minister, we had discussed this at MTSD, and we have a guarantee from the government that the situation will be revisited when the time comes, and then the benefits will start to be tapered off slowly, not with no shocks and not at one go.
Exactly.
Now we have a question asking whether will the teleworking agreement become indefinite after 4 years, same as definite contract?
So the telework agreement should not replace the contract of employment, but rather it should complement. So when you are engaging an employee, there should always be a contract of agreement drawn up. That's why I said in the telework agreement, the duties, the corresponding duties have to be divided between those duties which can be done at home and those which can be done at the office. So the telework agreement, of course, has to follow the parameters in terms of time frame as the contract of employment. But yes, the contract of employment will still apply.
Maybe you can tell us a bit the difference between dismissals and redundancies. We have found that this was being mixed up quite a bit, and there were employers that were taking certain decisions during COVID. Maybe you can explain what are the exact procedures and what these mean. If you make someone redundant, what can you do after, and things like that.
So the first thing which I urge employers to do is a very practical and simple things. You go online and you download the termination of employment from Jobs Plus, as I have done, there is a list of different types of termination, and each of one has a simple explanation. And from just reading it, you will immediately notice the difference between the two. Dismissal is when you dismiss someone because he is not adhering to the contract of employment. So he is not following the contract of employment, duties, hours. So the discipline part comes into play under dismissal as well. Now, if an employee is dismissed under these criteria, it's good to know for the employer that the employee can open an unfair dismissal case in front of the industrial tribunal. Redundancy is different because in redundancy we are speaking not because the employee did something not in line with the employment contract, but because there is lack of work at the moment. So in this case of redundancy, when a person is made redundancy, the employer, there are two rules that are important to follow. First one is too important to follow the last in, first out rule, and that the employer cannot employ someone else in that same role and in that same position with the same duties for a period of 1 year unless the employer offered that work to the ex-employee and the ex-employee then didn't accept. Maybe he found another job or what have you. So the obligations under the two are, and even the redress mechanisms can be very different. One deals because an employee dismissal deals with the employee not adhering to parts of the employment contract. The other one, redundancy, is because there is lack of work and the employer cannot keep the salaries and cannot keep the employee. But there are obligations, the last and first out, and the 1 year period to employ back that person in case that the operations increase.
Thank you, very clear. Going back a bit to our previous conversation, someone is asking, if an employee opts to stay at home to take care of the children, is the employee exempted from attending work and apply for the parent leave benefits? If yes, the employer can engage other employees to replace those employees.
To replace means that that the other employee will still remain in employment, no? I mean, there will be
That's how I
an additional worker in that case.
It's up to him, Abigail. As I was saying right now, we had a couple of situations whereby the employer and the employee agreed between themselves. The employer was happy to go on unpaid leave. Maybe he had other means of income or family income that he could support the family, and the employer was happy too. But as I said earlier on, they do not need to come at the IR because the request was originally made by the employee and not by the employer. So I hope this is a clear matter. Of course, if he's keeping he or she on the books and he's recruiting someone else, it means that he is engaging then someone else for that position. But that's entirely up then to what has been decided between the two and of course to the employer.
But I want to stress the point that because you refer to childcare centers and the government is aware that keeping opening businesses and keeping childcare centers closed, it might, and I think it's already creating a bit of an issue here. So the government is aware of that, and of course this is being considered not to continue creating some difficulties to, let's say, the employer-employee relationship. But in this case, I urge everyone to be as much as possible considerate of these claims, which are real claims in this sense, and be a bit more understanding of each and every employee that has these kind of circumstances. But I want to stress the point that the government is aware of this, and of course considerations are being made in this direction as well.
I wanted to make some clarifications for some questions that we are receiving related to the wage supplements. Someone is asking whether restaurants can apply for a partial weight supplement. The procedure related to the weight supplement is coming out from Malta Enterprise, and Malta Enterprise has opened up applications for everyone. Those that have suffered a significant reduction in business can apply for a full week supplement, and those that have suffered a partial can apply for a partial. Of course, Malta Enterprise will be reviewing these applications and awarding them according to what is presented to them and to merit. And if you had employees that were receiving the weight supplement and have resigned in the meantime, it is important that you make Malta Enterprise aware immediately, because you cannot receive any money that does not go to the employee, so that they stop the weight supplement for those particular employees that have resigned in the meantime. Those were just two quick clarifications. Are there any cases where there is a possibility to reduce salaries or else change some part of an employment contract?
Yes, in fact, Maltese law allows that in such circumstances, there is the infamous now Article 42, which states that you can reduce the conditions, such as, for example, the working hours from the original contract of employment upon two conditions: upon agreement with the employee and the consensus from the department. So once the employer approaches us, we will guide him through all the steps, how to approach his employees, how the best way to go about it. We also speak to employees. And we have to say that the majority cooperated, both employer and employees. They cooperated because we're all in the same situation after all. And then the department issues a permit outlining this particular case of the company. We have seen a variety of permits, those from completely working, having full week unpaid, from 1 day a week, 2 days, number of hours, 20 hours a week. We have seen a different variety, literally. And we issued the permit for a period of 4 weeks. Then I have another small team, which every 4 weeks they prompt the employer to see what the situation is, if he needs a renewal, if the renewal needs to be amended further, and basically we take each case from there. If they have any queries, they can always even phone us, the employers, on 1576, and we will guide them through the whole process.
And a follow-up question to that, someone is asking, can we change the employment conditions without changing the working hours? So it might be a question related to the other working conditions, not working hours, but it might be also asking, can they change the salary without changing the working hours?
So the salary, let's go back. The salary is linked, the remuneration is linked to hours of work performed. Let us not forget that the hours of work performed, you have other than entitlements which are linked, such as vacation leave, statutory bonuses, so it's not just the wage. Now, yes, there were some who approached us with the situation, but then even when the department's inspectors have literally sat down with the employer through Teams meeting and explained and saw the situation, they found ways and means which they can shift around their working pattern, decrease the hours in accordance to the current modus operandi, and so have the salary reduction. Why? Because unfortunately we had some instances where there were reports where employees were being forced, so to speak, to sign a letter doing full 40 hours but not being paid for the full 40 hours. Now we all know in terms of employment law that this leads to a precarious situation, and if the employee was not in consensus with this arrangement, then it can lead also to forced labor. So that's we are trying to say is revisit your working hours. If you go and find, you will see that obviously the situation changed. The operations have decreased. That's why in the first place we want to decrease the salary. It's not just because you want to not to follow your contract of employment, but because of the situation. So let us stick to the situation and work around the working hours. Now we are being very flexible. We are not stating this, let us operate on a 3-day basis, or we are being very flexible with the employer and accommodate to his or her own needs. Many also, Abigail, opted also for banking of hours. That is, that they are working less now, so that the hours banked, saved, so to speak, they will be able to work them at a later stage. And the rate of pay is still 1:1 with the banking of hours. So there will be no overtime in that particular circumstance. For banking of hours too, you will require the DIR permit.
Yes, this is in fact a discussion that Diane and I had very earlier on. The mindset is starting from if an employee is salary, his remuneration is valued at X amount. Just because COVID happened, that value that the employee is given doesn't change because of COVID. So you need to go around this in a different way. And as Diane is saying, discussions on a workplace level with the department will help them arrive to this conclusion in a maybe more creative or alternative way that the employer might not be aware that there is a possibility. I am going to clarify a bit because we have a number of questions related to childcare centers. As the minister said, the government is very aware with the situations of parents working and the pressures that are building. So, Minister, I would advise that they are a little bit more patient, because government, I think, would be working on a solution given government is aware of the situation.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is the banking of hours that you mentioned, Diane, open to all sectors?
Yes, it is. In fact, we have seen usually the banking of hours was traditionally associated, for example, to the hotels industry. Now we have seen even small enterprises which have applied for banking of hours. And we are being flexible as a department because usually the department only allowed for an unlimited number of hours. We have extended that. We have found, for example, we have a company who even extended over a year the banking of hours. But it's safeguarding the jobs and it's safeguarding even its operations. So yes, every company can apply.
Another way it might be applied. So banking hours, I am paying full-time 40 hours weekly, but staff, I am paying full-time 40 hours weekly, but staff are only able to do 10 to 12 hours weekly or less for 2 months to date. So can I ask to bank some hours?
Yes, of course. In that case, it would be the perfect example of banking of hours. And all he has to do is write to us on the same email, info.dir@gov.mt, and we'll guide him through in accordance. If he can state immediately in the meantime the hours that they are working, etc., so that we can ease up the process and we will issue a permit. The difference between the banking of hours permit and the Article 42, so to speak, is the banking of hours doesn't need to be renewed every 4 weeks because the banking of hours is immediately spread over a number of months as the employer wishes.
We are asked to repeat the email. It's info.dir@gov.mt. I hope it's clear. We can repeat it.
We can type it in the chat as well. Someone from our end will type it in the chat, the contact details, so they are there. Can you maybe give us an update, please, on the situation about the wage top-up? What is the situation? Are these being approved by the government?
Yes, so the top-ups, so now we are diverging a little bit from employment law. As you are aware, the top-ups is a result of a social pact which was done at MCESD. Basically states that as the government is keeping his end of the bargain and issuing the 800, the employer has to then top up with another 400. So what I'm speaking is irrespective now of the hours worked in the Article 42, so as not to confuse employers. Now, a recent agreement has been again reached between the social partners, whereby those employers which cannot cope with to fork out because of liquidity, cash issues, etc., the 400 are being asked to fill in a declaration stating that they cannot fork out these 400. But this declaration, of course, being a financial one, has to be signed by a certified accountant or auditor. Now, to even help even more employers, we are providing even a template to which they can use. They can contact us again on the same email address. They make reference to the top-up, so that then an employee from my department, she will contact them, she will provide the template and all the information that they need. So this applies to those employees who are not being able to keep, to fork out the 400 on top of the 800, so to speak.
Yes, I mean, we try to make it as simple as possible. In the beginning, we were asking, and we were being maybe more complex in how to deal with the situation. Now there was also, let's say, an agreement also with the social partners, and we agreed as a partner as well to go that way and make it, let's say, much easier for those who wish to apply to get a permit, not to, or to be allowed not to pay the top-up. Now, my appeal is for everyone to try to do the effort, even if it's not paid in full, the top-up, but at least some of it, it will send the right message. So my appeal to you is that this emanated from the agreement that there was around the table at MCSD. So 800 are being forked out by the government for each and every employee. And as a minimum, there is the 400 that needs to be topped up by the employers. Now, of course, it depends on the salary. If you have an employee that his salary is, or her salary is 1,000 euro, so the top-up should be not more than 200 euros. And we decided on 1,200 as a salary that we wish, as MCSD, to keep and pay as much as possible to the lower salaries or wages, basically. That's why 1,200. It was also the result of further discussion with the MCSD, so as to have, let's say, a threshold of a salary, and we arrived to 1,200. So please, I appeal to you that if you try to make an extra effort, I know that it's hard times for everyone, but if you can make that extra effort, I think it will not only be appreciated by government, of course, and MCSD, but it will be also appreciated by your employees as well.
Obviously, the situation with the top-up, the ideal scenario is when the employer is paying the employee the full wage according to the contract, and that is the first obligation of the employer. So the top-up is really for the exemption of the top-up is really for cases where there is a total impossibility for the employer to pay the top-up because of lengthy non-operation and the risk that this might have on the business. But yes, the first obligation of the employer is to stick to the employment contract. I'm going to go to one of the questions with regard to changing conditions. If employees are genuinely in agreement with their employer with regard to a change of conditions, say a change from full-time basis to full-time with reduced hours basis, why is there the need to procure the permit of the IER under Section 42? This change does not constitute less favorable terms and conditions of employment than those provided by law, as the law already caters for full-time and with reduced hours.
Okay, so a very interesting question indeed. A contract of employment cannot be changed from one day to the next. That is why the law allows that in special circumstances, in this situation because of COVID-19, you can go back to your original agreement in the sense that the department's role is a regulator in terms of employment conditions. Employment conditions which are stipulated in the contract of employment. Now, it is, as I said earlier, the Article 42 is a protection from both employer and employee. Unfortunately, we have seen many cases whereby a verbal agreement was given and they did not approach the department. Then, for some reason or another, the relationship turned into a bad note, and the employee approaches the department to open a claim, which legally can do so. So that's why the law has thought of such circumstances, that if you want to reduce to a full-time reduce, so you are not keeping to your end of the bargain, so to speak, to your original contract of employment, you can do so, but with the protection, with the consensus, with the blessing of the regulator. So more than that, you cannot really wish for. And also, the permit is there to protect then the employee, since it is given for a temporary period of time. So it is given with the condition that once things go back to normal, the original contract of employment still then applies. So we are not omitting the first original contract of employment, but we are giving a temporary reduction till things then go for the better.
So if an employee normally earns 2,000 euros and is reduced to half time, which means earning 1,000 euros, is the top up 200, which is the difference between the 800 and the 1,000 euros, should a permit be sought not to top up to 1.2, 1,200? So for the difference, a permit needs to be sought initially to shift away from the contract. Exactly. And change the working hours, yes?
Exactly. So the second, that's a permit, that's right. The permit is to go back from the hours worked, to put it in simple terminology. The other one is not a permit, but a justification to be exempt, as we said, not under employment law, but as part of the social pact done at MCSD between all social partners. So although you apply, so to speak, in the same, through the same email address, the two are distinct and far in between with regards to their objective. I hope that the employers are understanding a little bit better, because it might be confusing.
Until they get used to it, it is a little bit, but I think now they are getting the picture. Someone said that they have paid their employees in full throughout, but one employee did not attend for 3 hours, for 3 weeks of work. They still receive the wage subsidy. How am I supposed to go about it? Am I allowed to reduce leave allowance if they were not coming into work?
Exactly. The first thing, as the minister rightly saying, is did they approach the employee not on the 3rd week? I approached him on the 1st day. If he didn't show up for work, I mean, I would approach him.
What was the reason for not showing up for work?
Exactly.
Was it agreed with the employer or not? Or let's say that he decided or she decided not to go to work without giving any reason, a particular reason?
Now, the other point you mentioned is forced leave can be applied by the employer, and they can do so even by not approaching the department. It can be done, but it has to be done, not in arrears. It has to be done before the leave has actually been taken. You cannot then, because simply he didn't show up for work, then you apply for forced leave retrospectively. Doesn't work that way. In order to force leave to apply, the employer needs to state to the employee that he will be applying forced leave, and in those cases where the employer applies, gives the employee more leave than they have accumulated to date, and the employee resigns because he has found some other job, what have you, then the employer cannot go and open a case against the employee to retrieve back that leave. So the thing is that once you are imposing, you are forcing, then you cannot expect if the employee leaves to get back that leave, because you have imposed it, you have forced him to do so in the first place. But I wouldn't have waited for sure 3 weeks to ask why employee didn't show up for work if one of my employees. My advice is to ask from day one. And that ties also, Abigail, with the monitoring and performance we were speaking about if we want really this remote working to work.
Exactly. If someone doesn't show up to work, it is a sign that something is wrong. So obviously we have to inquire and see there and then what should be done about it, not after a number of days. Some are asking about vulnerable people returning to work. At the moment, the health authorities are saying that as much as possible, vulnerable individuals should stay at home to protect their health. Obviously, there is still also the possibility that they may apply to get a permission and to get clearance to be able to go to certain areas or else to go to work, and maybe they should discuss this situation directly with the health authorities, and they can tell them how they can do this as safely as possible, if this is possible. Now a bit of a more generic question. I think the department has gone through a lot of changes and has risen very well to the challenges that were in front of you, Diane. Where do you see, maybe for the minister or for Diane, where do you see the department going in the future? Have you already started thinking of how the department's role can develop further and maybe additional services that might be included?
In fact, we are speaking even at that ministry level and even internally, because yes, we have to shift to the changing requirements and to some requirements which will be here to stay. For example, one thing which we learned is the importance to distinguish and give individual attention, so to speak, the employers from the employees. That since the Labour Department, the Labour Office has formed even since World War II, and they were always treated as one lot. And maybe yes, we had to encounter COVID too as to realize that, and that I want to even continue to provide it even afterwards. Then we are speaking even with the ministry. Even I will now give the word to the minister on a more legislative point of view. I think yes, it has come the time that our era, the employment law, adapts a bit to be able to adapt to the current realities of the market and of the employment market.
What I will add is that we had already started discussing about, let's say, the future of the department and functions and what needs to be done even before COVID came and interrupted this discussion, because then due to COVID, of course, the department had to concentrate on other issues rather than on continuing the discussion about the future of the department. And there is a lot of work that we have to do, I think. And COVID permitting, it will give us at least some more time to discuss not only internally but also with social partners. I think we are talking about employment regulations here. We are talking about conditions of work, how the department operates, and it is my wish, of course, to not only hold internal discussions with the department itself, but also with social partners, with the intention being to have a legislative framework that is relevant for today and for tomorrow's needs. But also how we work together, so we will be in a position to work together more. The rules and regulations will be even clear for everyone and easy for everyone. So that's our wish. And of course, if there are new services that the department can give with more resources, of course, because that was also an issue before COVID. I think COVID showed that, yes, they rose to the occasion and they are working very keep and cope with all the requests. But still, if we need to be proactive, and that is definitely my wish and also the wish of the Director General, that as a department we will be more proactive, even to help businesses to continue to be or to come in line with the current legislative framework. Therefore, we need to be proactive, even to help. It's not the intention to punish. The intention should be that we facilitate, that we help, and in most cases, when employers are let's say, are told to come in line with the legislation, most of them comply. There are only the few that still persist in that. In that case, of course, then we need to take action. But it should not be the primary role. I mean, in my opinion, it should be more of to facilitate, to help, to assist, to be compliant, rather than to use this stick, so to speak. So that is the intention where we want to go. Of course, COVID-19 kept us from further discussions internally and, of course, with major stakeholders.
I think, in fact, maybe something that I forget to mention, and that is very interesting for those listening to know, that employment law is very much a live thing. I have the pleasure to meeting Diane on the DIER board on a monthly basis to discuss changes in employment law that are necessary, together with the other employer organizations and other trade union organizations. So the case isn't that now that COVID has come, we have realized that something needs to change. Nobody had anticipated something like COVID, and it's very important that the department and the ministry are taking this opportunity to say, yes, maybe COVID was not the last time it has happened. Maybe we will experience future instances that we need to be better prepared for, so that we can reach employers and employees better next time round. Unless you have any kind of concluding remarks, I will thank you very much for your participation. And anyone who has posted more questions, we will reply to them. And if need be, we will get back to the department to help us if there are any complicated answers that we need to give. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, we thank you as well. It was, I hope it was fruitful to all the participants in this webinar. And if need be, we are here to give support, and please don't hesitate to come to us as a ministry and the department. We are here to help.
Thank you very much. I know you have a free phone as well for employers. Please remind me the free phone number.
1576 is dedicated to the employers.
Yes, since start of COVID, the DIER also dedicated a specific number for employers, 1576. Thank you very much for that, and have the rest of the day. I hope you experience it well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.